All right, so week 3 of college football just wrapped up. So let's do the analysis and takeaways. Let's get into it. So, first off, let's start with a little right wrong. And the first thing that I think I was absolutely right about was Alabama. A lot of people were worried, concerned after they kind of struggled a little bit with South Florida for most of the game. I know the final score was 42-16, but if you watch the game, it was like tight going into the fourth quarter, and Alabama really pulls away at the end. Then people a lot of concern. I think I saw a lot of people drop them in their rankings. I think Joel Klatt had them eighth, and all I saw was a team that their O line was a little bit hurt. And when they put I forget his name, but they put the O lineman back in who was like questionable for the game, and they didn't want to use him, but they felt like they had to. Then they rolled at the end, and I thought that was just a sign the team was clicking. And then I thought this is a team that's going to roll Wisconsin. I believe I predicted 45-14, just about right. I mean, I guess I gave Alabama 3 more, Wisconsin 4 more, but this was pretty much exactly what I was expecting the game to go like. I thought Alabama was too athletic. And yes, Wisconsin's quarterback did get hurt, so maybe you think that impacted the game significantly. I personally don't think there was going to be a huge difference either way between Wisconsin quarterbacks. I didn't feel like that was the factor that was going to decide the game, that either one of them could play well enough to beat this team. I think we saw an Alabama team that's really dangerous. I picked to win the national title. I still think they could definitely do that. With the way Jalen Milroe's playing, running the ball and throwing the ball, the speed they have to beat teams over the top, the offensive line, when healthy, is great, and the run game is pretty good. I think the only thing you want to see is if they can establish an intermediate pass game. And then also, to be fair, although defense has been good so far this year, it hasn't really been tested. And going up against Georgia, and not next week because it's a bye week, but in a couple weeks, that's going to be a really big test and a game I'm really looking forward to. But so far, and specifically for this game, I was definitely right about Alabama. Now, a team I was very wrong about. I don't think I'm alone in this. I think a lot of people were very wrong about Florida State when it comes to the whole season. I didn't see anyone really predict them to go 0-3. I had them 3-0 at this point. I'm sure some people had them losing a game by now. And I wasn't even that high on Florida State. I mean, they were the favorite to win the ACC, and I predicted them 4th. So that's lower than a lot of people. I think a lot of people had them going to the playoff. I had them going 9-3. So I thought I was low on them. I was not nearly low enough. But what I was wrong about specifically this week is I thought, okay, this team's not going to be a top 25 caliber team. They're not going to be a contender in the ACC or, even a good team. But I thought after starting 0-2 and getting the bye week, I thought they'd be able to regroup enough to get a home win and kind of be like, okay, maybe this is a team that can still compete for bowl eligibility. But now starting 0-3, I don't see this team, especially you still have Clemson, you still have Miami. I feel like those are 2 for sure losses, and the way they're playing, to go 6-1 over the rest of the games to get to bowl eligibility does not seem very likely. So I thought after a bye, this team would kind of, not be a good team now or figure out everything and live up to preseason expectations. But I thought it would do enough to beat Memphis, who's, yes, a really good group of 5 team, but still doesn't have the talent of Florida State. Not that Boston College or Georgia Tech did either, but I thought the coaching would be better in this game. I thought the players would work better together after a bye week and figure some stuff out, and they did not. They looked just as bad as they have in the prior 2 weeks. So, I mean, it's really embarrassing for Florida State. You go 12-0 last year, then I thought you should have made the playoff based on merit, because I didn't think they were one of the 4 best teams, but I thought because of the way the system works, they should have been in. But regardless, now coming in this year, I feel like there were a lot of people who thought Florida State was wanting to prove a point, and to start 0-3, really disappointing, especially the way it's looked. All right, one more thing I was right about, and that is the Oregon Ducks. So they defeated Oregon State 49-14, and this was a team that struggled against Idaho in week 1, really struggled. I mean, they moved the ball, but couldn't really turn it into points a lot of the time. And then they really, really struggled against Boise State, needed multiple special teams touchdowns, a game-winning field goal. It was a great game, and Boise State, I think, is a good team, but Oregon did not look like a top-level contender, and this is a team I picked to win the Big Ten championship, to go to the national championship. I have them as my runner-up, and they did not look anywhere near that level of team that I thought they could be. And I wasn't wavering, though. I still like the talent on this team, and I was just saying it's going to click at some point. And I thought that after they beat Boise State, it was like, okay, they figured it out. They found their way to win these first two games. Now they're going to start becoming the team everyone thought they'd be. And I don't think they're quite there yet, but defeating Oregon State 49-14 is a huge step in getting there. And I think just because I was just saying you got to have patience with Oregon. They're going to become a top-level team, and they don't have like huge level threats before Ohio State. I think you have 5 weeks before Ohio State, so it's okay that they're starting slow. They're going to get there, and by the time the Ohio State game rolls around, they'll be just the team we thought they were, or at least really close to that, and certainly capable of competing with and beating Ohio State. So that's the final thing that I was right about. Next up, who was the best game of the day? So there's a couple of contenders here, or I'm going to say three main contenders, in my opinion, that were the best games from a watchability standpoint. So, like, yes, not from a competitive standpoint. It had to be somewhat entertaining. So, in third place, I think Pitt, West Virginia was an exciting game, especially with the way it ended. Pitt being down, 10 points with like 4 minutes left, maybe 5, getting the 2 touchdowns. Second straight week where Pittsburgh finds a way to win a game. I think they had no place winning. I don't think their team's very good, but they're 3-0. I thought Cincinnati should beat them. I thought Cincinnati would beat them. Pitt comes back 27-6 to win by 1, I believe. And then West Virginia I thought was better than them, had them beat, but made too many mistakes. And then Pitt comes back and beats West Virginia as well. And Pitt was more competitive the whole way through with West Virginia than they were with Cincinnati. But either way, it was a very good game, but came in third place for this. And then in second place, I thought TCU-UCF was a very good game. Came down to the wire. I thought UCF didn't lead like the whole game. Takes the lead like 30 seconds left. TCU still has a chance for a field goal. It was a great game. But what I'm going with for the game of the day is LSU versus South Carolina, right? This was college game day. It was the noon kickoff. South Carolina was at home, and LSU was able to win it 36-33. And I think this is a game, if you're a South Carolina fan or a coach or a player, right, you just got to be kicking yourself. I mean, you have 2 pick sixes wiped off the board for penalty. Both, I guess, somewhat controversial. The second one, I do think that's a late hit, and it's just like they had no impact on the play. Like, why? You don't have to do that. You don't do that, South Carolina probably wins the game. Of course, also unfortunate for South Carolina was that Sellers was knocked out because he was playing really well. He had the 75-yard touchdown run. Yes, he had the interception where he forced into double coverage. He makes plays like that where a young quarterback makes some mistakes. But overall, he was having a very good game. And then they lost him. And Ashford wasn't terrible, but I don't think he played as well as Sellers. Gave him a chance to tie the game at the end, though. So, you got to give him credit for that. He had a really good drive at the end. But this was a game, it seemed like both teams were like, one team was going to lose this game because, South Carolina turns it over with the Ashford fumble, and then Nussmeier throws the pick 6 that ends up just being a regular pick because of the penalty. Just a lot of turnovers, a lot of sloppy play. Nussmeier could have had even more interceptions. I feel like he was forcing a lot of throws. So I don't think it was the cleanest game, but it was very exciting. And another thing, LSU, not me because I did not think very highly of them this year. I think some people might have overrated LSU. Just something to watch for there. And who are the big surprises of the day? Or we're just going to have one. And it is the Kentucky Wildcats. So you lose to Georgia 13-12. And this was actually shocking to me. Not that, okay, because yes, Georgia usually struggles in their first road SEC game. Like every season, Kirby Smart pointed this out when he was interviewed on the field after the game, where they almost lost to Missouri. I forget the other one, but it was they kind of struggle in the road opener of SEC play historically because road games are hard to win in the SEC. But no, for real though, road games are just hard to win anywhere. But what was shocking about this was Kentucky was awful at home against South Carolina. They got beat 31-6. Vandegrift was terrible. The backup was terrible. They couldn't block anybody. They had no competency on offense. And the defense was fine, but the offense was not playing complementary football. And then the offense wasn't good against Georgia, but it was a lot better than it was against South Carolina. and I wasn't surprised that Vandegrift played better because he had a really bad game against South Carolina, and Vandegrift didn't even play great. It was just the fact that the O line held up so well, and not like so well, but like compared to what it did against South Carolina, there was a great offensive line performance for Kentucky, which was really, really surprising to me. And I don't know if Georgia just didn't get up for this. The pass rush, wasn't locked in. I just don't know what was going on, because I'm not worried about Georgia because they have games like this, but it was just really shocking to see them not just kind of replicate what South Carolina did on the defensive line to Kentucky. So it is something I'm looking out for Georgia. Not really concerned, though, because I'm sure that they're still Georgia. Other note, though, you can't punt the ball with 3 minutes left back to the number one team in the country. If you're down one, it's 4th and 13. Yes, you're probably not going to get it, but you're going to lose either way. Like, you have a chance to take down the number one team in the country in your building for like a historic win for Kentucky. You go for it. Oh, it was so frustrating. It was so frustrating. And I don't think they would have got it. I'm sure they would have lost, but you got to take the chance. That was crazy to me. I don't understand how you could punt that ball. Next up, who's our most impressive team on the weekend? There are a few different options here. Want to go with someone I haven't talked about yet. There are a few big wins, but ultimately I decided to choose the Kansas State Wildcats. They defeated one of my favorite teams, maybe my favorite team, the Arizona Wildcats 31-7. And I did predict them to beat Arizona, but I predicted, I believe, 30-27. I was really shocked by how much they limited Arizona's passing attack, because I do think T-Mac McMillan for Arizona is the best receiver in the country, and he still played really well. Even in this game, he made some ridiculous plays, just absurd plays from a wide receiver. But I didn't think Arizona targeted him enough. And then the other thing was, and I will say, this game, there's a key play in the first quarter. Arizona goes down the field, start the game, scores, makes it 7-0. Then Kansas State, in their own territory, goes for 4th and 1. I don't think he got there, and they didn't review it. But they need a full yard, and I don't think the pile even moved. If you guys remember the play, let me know what you guys thought. I thought he was clearly short, and Arizona would have had the ball deep in Kansas State's territory to take a 2-score lead. And I know they ended up getting blown out, but a play like that completely changes the momentum of the game and how the game's going to go. Say Arizona, you score, then you get a 4th down stop, you get a touchdown after that, 14-0. I think the game's completely different. So it just kind of goes to show when they talk about football being a game of inches. That play, I think, completely changed how the game played out. But Kansas State still impressed me because of how well the defense played the rest of the game. And then Avery Johnson, there are a few mistakes, especially the one at the end of the half. He runs around, doesn't realize he runs out the clock. But overall, pretty good performance. And what's really impressive is just this Kansas State rushing attack. But there were concerns over Arizona's run defense, so I don't know how good that rushing attack really is. But this is 2 weeks in a row where Kansas State's kind of outperformed my expectations, because I picked them to lose to Tulane. Still kind of think they should have lost to Tulane. And then I thought this would be a much closer game, but they blew them out. Silver lining for Arizona is it's not a conference game, so if you figure things out and roll in conference, you still have your whole playoff future ahead of you if you can win the Big 12, and this doesn't impact it at all, even though both teams are in the Big 12. But overall, really impressed by Kansas State on the rushing attack, on the defense, and got to give them credit. So finally, what are my biggest takeaways from week 3 of college football? Number 3, I think that USC may be getting overhyped. And here's why. So, and I'll also give a rebuttal at the end for why they may not be. I think everyone watched the standalone, No, that's not the Labor Day game. That was just the Sunday night game in Vegas between USC LSU. And everyone sees, LSU's preseason number 13, and they think of what LSU is in their head, right? And then USC beats them, plays pretty physical, stops the run against an LSU O-line that was really hyped up, and now USC wins this game. Miller Moss plays well, and now they're getting all this hype, right? But now when we look at that win in context, and I kind of thought about this at the time too, because I wasn't as high on LSU as everyone else. I think that offense is not nearly as good as it was last year, which was the last thing people had in their head going into week 1. The offensive line, while it has some great players, Hasn't been super physical in run blocking, and they still haven't established a dominant run game, or even like they get away from the run a lot because they just don't do a very good job running the ball. And I think a lot of credit was given to USC for kind of stopping the run against LSU line that people thought might be the best in the country. And they have really good tackles and really good in pass protection, but the run game not really there. So I think that's part of the reason is USC. How impressive is it really to stop LSU's run game? I think there's a decent amount of teams that are going to stop LSU's run game this year. And then the next thing, though, and this is a reason why they may not be overrated, is they did then shut out Utah State 41-0. And Utah State, I don't think is very good, but they challenged kind of Utah, given it was without Cam Rising. But they still scored on Utah. They were up, I think, was it 17-3 maybe? I could be wrong on that. But maybe 14-3. They had the lead, though, with multiple scores on Utah. And USC shut out Utah State completely. So that's when you look at like, oh, is maybe this defense is actually for real. And I'm really excited to see USC travel to the Big House because Michigan, I think they've tried, or they haven't really tried to just be that run first or run only team that I thought they would be this year. They've tried to, let Davis Warren kind of experience what it's like to. I think he's been throwing the ball more than I remember McCarthy throwing the ball, which is weird. I do think it might be Alex Orji getting to play this week, though, because Warren threw 3 interceptions in the Arkansas State game, and Orji then took over at the end of the game. So I expect a lot of Alex Orji. And I do think, though, Michigan, because how Warren's really struggled to throw the ball, and you got to assume Orji's worse than him because we know Orji's a better runner, and if he was a better passer, then he would clearly be starting. So I think Michigan's going to be forced into just running the ball. And so to finally see another test of Michigan, who, in our heads, maybe they're not maybe they're not this year, but I think people think of Michigan as like the ultra physical team of college football because of what they were under Harbaugh the past few years. Line them up the line of scrimmage, best O-lines in the country, Blake Corum, Hassan Haskins, just power running, smash mouth football. And I think they may be forced into leaning into that because of how what's the word for it? Just non-explosive the offensives looked in the passing game, and a USC team that I think you got to keep off the field. So it'd be interesting to see that matchup. But overall, I just want to say that USC may be getting a little bit overhyped. It's just something to look out for. Number 2, I have that the top of the SEC is at least 4 deep, and it might be 6 deep. I mean, I think for sure we know Georgia's a contender, right? I think we know Texas is a contender. Yes, Quinn Ewers goes down, but I think Arch Manning's probably the best backup quarterback in the country. I know he looked great against UTSA, but that's UTSA. But the O-line's great, the receivers are great. So I think Texas we know is a contender, destroyed Michigan. Alabama, I feel like we know they're a contender, just destroyed Wisconsin. I think they're really good. So that's 3 top-level teams. Ole Miss hasn't played anyone yet. Well, they played Wake Forest, crushed Wake Forest. Wake Forest I don't think is very good, but still a Power 4 team, and Ole Miss has looked dominant. So that's at least 4. But then, and you look at Tennessee, what they did to NC State, and maybe some of you guys think it's at least 5 deep. Because I didn't fully buy into Tennessee in the preseason, I think I might be a little bit slow to jump on them because I was a bit skeptical. But they have looked great, and so I think they definitely have a chance to jump in, or maybe they're already there in that upper echelon, so that could be 5. Missouri beat Boston College. The defense looks pretty good, which I thought was their biggest concern. They have great wide receiver weapons. Brady Cook plays well. He's delivered in clutch moments. I still doubt that they can compete with those top-level SEC teams, but I could be wrong, and there's a chance Missouri is there at 6. And then some people might like LSU. I'm not there. The team I think is most interesting to me is Oklahoma because the defense I think is actually really good, and the offense hasn't fully clicked yet. I feel like Jackson Arnold still had some struggles, and they've struggled with health at wide receiver with Nick Anderson missing some games, Jalil Farouk missing some games. But Deion Burks has been there, but the connection hasn't fully clicked. And I feel like if one of these weeks, also the O-line has struggled a little bit, which we thought it would. But as the O-line gets better and they get healthy, there's a chance the offense just clicks. And if they get a really good offense to pair with what I think is a really good defense, they could actually move up and be one of the top teams in the SEC as well. So the takeaway is just the SEC is extremely deep with real contenders, at least 4, I think, and I could see as much as 7. And my final takeaway is that right now there's no clear favorite to win the title. And that doesn't mean that anyone can win the title or that it's wide open, but it just means that Georgia, we've seen look vulnerable. So even if I do think they're probably the best team, but they look vulnerable against a Kentucky team that I don't think anyone thinks is very good. Alabama, we saw struggle against South Florida. We know they're susceptible if one of their linemen goes down, that they could have issues. Texas has looked great so far, but the quarterback just went down. Arch Manning's inexperienced. If he has to carry them again or play, because you don't have to carry Texas at quarterback, but how would he perform if he has to play against Oklahoma or Georgia? I think it's at least a question mark. Ole Miss and Ohio State, we haven't seen play top level competition yet. Miami, I think, looked great, but I think there's just general skepticism surrounds that program and the coaching staff with Cristobal. Tennessee, we think could be really good. I kind of got to see a little bit more. Oregon struggled in the first 2 weeks. I think they'll end up being great, or I think they're on their way to being a great team. But we got to see more out of them for sure. So just overall, I think there's a lot of teams that we think are really good or can be really good, but everyone is at least somewhat vulnerable, and there's no clear favorite to win the title, which should make for a really exciting next few weeks of college football as teams separate themselves into tiers. Who's the upper echelon? Who's those next level contenders? And who falls into just, solid top 25 teams? Should be very fun to watch. I thank you guys for watching this video. Please leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.